Nazi Germany with an atomic bomb before America is usually imagined as a single scene. A German aircraft approaches London. A weapon falls. A city disappears beneath a rising cloud. Britain surrenders, the Soviet Union collapses, and Hitler wins the war. But that image begins at the wrong end of the problem. Before Nazi Germany could use an atomic bomb, it had to build one. Before it could build one, it needed to produce fissile material on an industrial scale. Before it could do that, it needed enormous factories, vast electrical power, protected transport networks, specialized equipment, trained workers, military coordination, and years of uninterrupted effort. Then it needed an aircraft capable of carrying the weapon through enemy-controlled skies. And after the first explosion, it needed another bomb. The real question is not simply what Hitler would have done with an atomic weapon. It is what Nazi Germany would have needed to become in order to possess one before the United States, and whether even that transformed war machine could have converted nuclear destruction into victory. The fear of a German bomb began with real science. In late 1938, researchers identified nuclear fission, the splitting of an atomic nucleus, releasing energy and additional neutrons. Under the right conditions, those neutrons could split more nuclei. The process could become a chain reaction. The military implication was not immediately a finished weapon. It was a possibility, but it was a possibility that could not be ignored. Germany had been one of the world's leading centers of modern physics. German laboratories contained experienced researchers, respected institutions, and scientists capable of understanding the importance of the discovery. The prospect of this scientific power serving the Nazi state deeply alarmed physicists who had escaped fascism and anti-Semitic persecution. The Einstein-Szilard letter warned President Franklin D. Roosevelt that uranium might become the basis of an extraordinarily powerful bomb, and that Germany might already be interested in the necessary materials. At this stage, no one knew how close such a weapon might be. That uncertainty made the threat more dangerous. The United States could not assume the technical obstacles were impossible. It could not assume German scientists would fail. And it could not wait until a German nuclear program became visible from the outside. The nuclear race began because the consequences of being second appeared unacceptable. On paper, Nazi Germany possessed an early advantage. Scientists including Otto Hahn, Werner Heisenberg, Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, and others were connected to German nuclear research. The regime controlled uranium resources in occupied Europe. It had a powerful chemical industry, experienced engineers, and a military already searching for weapons that might restore strategic advantage. But scientific talent did not exist separately from the political system around it. The Nazi regime had already damaged the scientific world it hoped to exploit. Anti-Semitic laws and political persecution removed scholars from universities, destroyed careers, and drove scientific talent out of Germany and occupied Europe. Some of those émigré scientists later contributed to the Allied nuclear effort. Others strengthened the broader scientific network available to Britain and the United States. The regime had weakened its own intellectual base before the nuclear race reached full speed. This did not make German nuclear research irrelevant. It made it fragmented. Researchers could investigate reactors, moderators, uranium, and chain reactions. Individual laboratories could make progress. But a laboratory program and a weapons program were not the same thing. An atomic bomb required far more than understanding the physics. Natural uranium contains only a small proportion of the isotopes suitable for the kind of fast chain reaction required by one early bomb design. Separating that isotope demanded enormous facilities, precision equipment, electrical power, and repeated processing. Another possible route required a functioning nuclear reactor capable of producing plutonium. That meant creating and controlling a sustained chain reaction, then chemically separating the new material from intensely radioactive reactor products. Both paths were difficult. Both demanded industrial systems that had never existed before. Both consumed resources on a scale that could not remain hidden inside a normal research budget. This was the first great limitation of the German effort. Nazi Germany had physicists studying nuclear energy. It did not have a German Manhattan Project. The decisive separation came in 1942. By then, the war had expanded into a continental struggle of production, transport, fuel, manpower, and time. Germany was fighting the Soviet Union in the east. Britain remained in the war. The United States had entered the conflict. Every major program competed for skilled workers, metals, electricity, construction capacity, and political attention. German nuclear scientists discussed the possibility of a bomb with Albert Speer, the armaments minister. The conclusion presented to the leadership was not that an atomic weapon violated the laws of physics. It was that such a weapon could not be delivered within a short wartime time frame, using the resources then available. That distinction mattered. The program was not abandoned completely. Research continued, but it was not expanded into an all-out national effort with the authority, investment, and industrial priority necessary to race toward a bomb. After the summer of 1942, the German and American paths moved in opposite directions. German research faced worsening wartime conditions. The American effort became an industrial empire. The Manhattan Project linked several enormous sites, each built to solve a different part of the problem. At Oak Ridge, vast facilities pursued uranium enrichment. At Hanford, reactors and chemical plants were built to produce plutonium. At Los Alamos, scientists and engineers worked to turn fissile material into functioning weapons. More than 100,000 people became part of the wider project. Wartime spending reached roughly $2.2 billion. Entire industrial complexes were constructed, powered, supplied, guarded, and concealed. Many workers did not know the full purpose of the equipment they operated. No single scientist controlled the complete machine. That was precisely the point. The Manhattan Project succeeded because the United States converted a scientific question into a coordinated military-industrial program. It combined research with project management, construction, chemistry, metallurgy, electricity, intelligence, transport, security, and weapons engineering. Geography also mattered. The main American sites stood far beyond the reach of German bombers. They could expand without repeated evacuation. Equipment could remain in place. Electricity could continue flowing. Trains could carry material between secure facilities. Failed methods could consume enormous resources without immediately destroying the project. The United States could afford to pursue several technical paths at once. Nazi Germany could not easily reproduce those conditions. Its industrial centers faced increasing Allied attack. Its transport system came under growing pressure. Fuel shortages became more severe. Skilled labor and machinery were already demanded by aircraft, submarines, armored vehicles, rockets, air defenses, and the basic replacement needs of a multi-front war. A nuclear program on the American scale would not have appeared from unused capacity. It would have taken resources from somewhere else. That opportunity cost is often missing from the popular version of this story. Every additional factory needed concrete, steel, electrical equipment, machine tools, workers, and transport. Every protected underground site required time and construction capacity. Every scientific specialist assigned to nuclear work became unavailable to another program. Even a dictatorship could not order physical resources into existence. The regime could choose priorities. It could not remove scarcity. Heavy water production in occupied Norway became one important part of the German reactor effort. Allied and Norwegian operations against the Vemork facility disrupted that supply. Those operations mattered, but they did not single-handedly prevent a completed Nazi bomb. Even with more heavy water, Germany would still have needed a successful reactor, a reliable path to weapons material, chemical separation, bomb engineering, testing, mass production, and a delivery system. Near the end of the war, the experimental German reactor at Hagerloch still did not achieve a self-sustaining chain reaction. That fact places the German program in its proper scale. Germany was not standing beside a completed atomic bomb, waiting for one final shipment or one missing calculation. It remained far from the complete industrial chain required to manufacture and use a nuclear weapon. The post-war farm hall recordings added another layer to the debate. German nuclear scientists, detained in Britain, learned that an atomic bomb had destroyed Hiroshima. Their recorded reactions revealed surprise, technical discussion, disagreement, and attempts to explain why Germany had not achieved the same result. Those conversations later fed arguments over whether German scientists had misunderstood the problem, lacked resources, avoided building the weapon, or reconstructed their own wartime roles after defeat. The evidence does not support one simple heroic story in which a single physicist secretly saved the world by sabotaging Hitler's bomb. Nor does it support the opposite myth that Germany had nearly finished the weapon. The clearer explanation is structural. German scientists understood that nuclear weapons might be possible. Nazi Germany never assembled the industrial system necessary to produce one before the war ended. That is real history. Now, the timeline changes. For Nazi Germany to possess several atomic bombs before the United States, the point of divergence must come no later than 1942, and probably earlier. The German leadership must recognize nuclear weapons as a strategic priority before the military situation begins to collapse. The uranium program must receive sustained authority, not scattered support. Production facilities must be constructed and protected. Scientific teams must cooperate across institutional boundaries. The regime must retain or replace talent that its own policies drove away. A route to fissile material must succeed. Bomb engineering must begin before that material is ready. And a delivery aircraft must be developed or modified alongside the weapon. This is already more than a single lucky breakthrough. It is a chain of coordinated decisions. The rest of Nazi Germany does not automatically improve with it. The same geography remains. The same war continues. Britain still resists. The Soviet Union still mobilizes on an enormous scale. The United States still possesses vast industrial depth. German transport, fuel, and production still face competing demands. The nuclear program gains priority. Everything else must absorb the cost. Assume that the program succeeds anyway. The first bomb is completed. Germany has now solved the scientific problem. It has not yet solved the military one. First-generation atomic bombs were large, heavy, and specialized. The United States did not simply place them beneath ordinary bombers. It modified a group of B-29 aircraft under the Silver Plate program, changing their bomb bays, reducing weight, adjusting equipment, and training crews for the mission. Germany would need its own equivalent. The V-2 rocket does not solve the problem. The early atomic bombs were too large and heavy for the V-2 to carry as a practical nuclear warhead. Producing a smaller weapon would require further engineering beyond the already difficult task of building the first bomb. A German aircraft might offer a more realistic delivery method, particularly against a relatively nearby target. But distance would not be the only problem. By the later stages of the war, Germany no longer controlled the air over much of Europe. Allied radar, fighters, and anti-aircraft defenses made deep strategic missions increasingly dangerous. A unique aircraft carrying Germany's only nuclear weapon could be intercepted, damaged, forced away from its target, or destroyed before release. Possessing the bomb would therefore create a new vulnerability. Germany would have to risk an irreplaceable weapon on a delivery system that might fail. The target would matter just as much as the weapon. London would offer immense political and symbolic impact. It was closer than many Soviet targets and central to the British war effort. But it was also heavily defended, and destroying part of the capital would not automatically destroy the British government, armed forces, industry, or alliance with the United States. Moscow would offer a different kind of political target. Yet reaching it with a large weapon would be more difficult, and the Soviet state had already demonstrated an ability to continue fighting after losing territory, cities, infrastructure, and millions of people. An Allied logistics port could offer a more direct military effect. A successful strike might destroy ships, warehouses, transport links, troops, and accumulated supplies. It might delay an operation and force the Allies to disperse critical infrastructure. But a port could be rebuilt, replaced, or bypassed. No target offers automatic victory. The timing now becomes decisive. Suppose Germany completes one bomb in late 1944 or early 1945. At this point, German forces are being compressed from east and west. Fuel is scarce. Transport networks are under attack. Industrial production is increasingly disrupted. Allied armies have returned to Western Europe, while Soviet forces are driving toward the heart of the Reich. A nuclear strike in this period could produce destruction on a scale Europe had never experienced. If delivered against London, it could kill civilians, destroy government and transport infrastructure, and create a profound political crisis. If used against Antwerp or another major Allied logistics center, it could disrupt the flow of supplies supporting the Western advance. If used against a Soviet city, concentration area, or transport hub, it could delay operations and inflict catastrophic losses. The shock would extend far beyond the target. Allied governments would have to assume that more bombs might exist. Ports, airfields, headquarters, and troop concentrations would become potential nuclear targets. Forces might disperse. Operational plans might slow. Intelligence services would intensify efforts to locate German production sites, weapons teams, and delivery aircraft. Yet one bomb would not repair Germany's fuel system. It would not replace destroyed aircraft. It would not reopen damaged railways. It would not remove Allied armies from Europe or reconstruct the forces already lost on the Eastern Front. Britain's surrender would not be guaranteed. The country had endured years of bombing without leaving the war. A nuclear attack would be different in scale, but historical endurance makes immediate capitulation an unsafe assumption. The Soviet Union's surrender would be no more certain. Its government had continued fighting through destruction and casualties on an immense scale. One ruined city, however terrible, might strengthen demands for retaliation rather than negotiation. The United States would still be moving toward its own atomic bomb. A German nuclear attack would probably increase the urgency surrounding that effort, not reduce it. It could also remove political hesitation over using the American weapon against Germany once it became available. In this late scenario, the bomb changes the final phase of the war. It may delay an operation. It may alter target priorities. It may produce a humanitarian disaster and provoke severe retaliation. But the most plausible outcome remains German defeat, possibly later, possibly under even more destructive conditions, but not transformed into victory by one weapon. Now move the bomb earlier. Assume Nazi Germany possesses several atomic weapons in 1943. This is the most dangerous version of the scenario that still allows meaningful strategic analysis. Germany is no longer at the edge of immediate collapse. Its armies still occupy vast territories. The Western Allies have not yet opened a major front in France. The Soviet Union has survived the initial invasion and is recovering the strategic initiative, but the war's final shape is not yet settled. Several bombs would give Germany choices that one weapon could not provide. It could use one bomb and hold others in reserve. It could combine destruction with a threat of further attacks. It could strike a city, then attempt to use fear as diplomatic pressure. It could target military logistics, forcing the Allies to rethink how they concentrated ships, supplies, aircraft, and troops. It could threaten Britain before any cross-channel invasion force assembled. The political consequences would be enormous. Every Allied government would have to ask whether the next port, capital, or army concentration might be destroyed without warning. But the apparent advantage contains a hidden constraint. Several bombs require more than several completed weapons. They require continuing production. A nuclear arsenal is not a captured stockpile that can be used once and forgotten. It depends on reactors or enrichment plants operating over time. It depends on electricity, replacement components, trained specialists, secure transport, chemical processing, assembly teams, storage procedures, and functioning delivery units. Those facilities would become the most important targets in Europe. Once Germany demonstrated a nuclear capability, the Allies would have overwhelming incentive to find and destroy the system behind it. Bombing priorities could change. Resistance networks and intelligence services would search for unusual construction sites, power consumption, rail movements, guarded laboratories, and specialized industrial equipment. The Allies could disperse ports and headquarters, increase fighter protection around likely targets, alter invasion staging, and direct more resources toward attacking German airfields and long-range aircraft. Surprise would not last forever. Germany might achieve the first nuclear strike. It could not assume the enemy would remain exposed in the same way for the second. The Eastern Front presents an even harder problem. An atomic bomb could destroy a headquarters, a rail junction, a troop concentration, or part of a city. It might interrupt one operation and force Soviet units to disperse. But the Soviet war effort extended across immense territory. Its armies, factories, political institutions, and transport networks did not depend on a single point. Nuclear weapons could inflict terrible damage without eliminating the Soviet Union's ability to fight. To force a strategic collapse, Germany would need accurate intelligence, reliable delivery, repeated weapons, and a political effect that cannot be predicted with confidence. The bombing of Moscow, even if technically possible, would not guarantee Soviet surrender. It might instead intensify a war already understood by the Soviet population and leadership as a struggle for survival. Britain would face a different calculation. A successful nuclear attack on London, followed by a credible threat of additional strikes, could create pressure for negotiation more severe than anything produced by the conventional blitz. Civilian evacuation, government continuity, American support, the number of surviving German weapons, and the ability to deliver them would all influence the decision. Negotiation becomes more conceivable in this scenario. It does not become inevitable. Britain would also know that the United States was mobilizing its own enormous resources. If the German arsenal appeared limited, continuing the war might offer the prospect of eventual nuclear retaliation. If the German arsenal appeared capable of repeated attacks, the political crisis would become much deeper. The number of bombs therefore matters, but credibility matters more. A threat works only when the enemy believes another weapon exists, believes it can reach the target, and believes the attacker is willing to use it. Germany would have reasons to conceal its remaining stockpile. The Allies would have reasons to doubt German claims, exaggerate their own progress, disperse their forces, and continue attacking. Nuclear weapons would add a new layer of fear and uncertainty to the war. They would not remove strategy. Could several bombs prevent an Allied invasion of Western Europe? They could delay it. Ports, embarkation zones, and concentrated invasion fleets would become dangerously attractive targets. The Allies might spread their staging areas, strengthen air defenses, increase deception, and postpone operations while searching for German delivery units. A nuclear strike against a major logistics hub after a landing could disrupt an entire campaign. But Germany would still need to know where and when the Allies were concentrating. It would still need to deliver the bomb through defended airspace. It would still have to decide whether to use a scarce weapon against soldiers and supplies rather than a political target. Even a successful strike would not eliminate American industrial power. Ships could be replaced. Supplies could move through other ports. Aircraft and armies could return. The cost would be enormous, and the delay might be strategically important. Yet unless Germany could continue producing bombs faster than the Allies could adapt, and faster than the United States could complete its own weapon, the advantage would narrow. This is the midpoint of the scenario where the obvious answer begins to fail. The atomic bomb could change battles, operations, and political calculations. It could not make Germany's enemies passive. The first use would begin a nuclear competition under wartime conditions. The American program would probably accelerate further. Britain and the United States would intensify the search for German nuclear sites. Soviet intelligence would have even greater incentive to obtain nuclear information. Allied strategy might shift toward capturing or destroying suspected facilities before Germany could expand its arsenal. The German advantage would be real. It would also create the strongest possible coalition incentive to remove it. there is one scenario in which the war changes more fundamentally. Germany not only develops several bombs by 1943, but also creates significant continuing nuclear production. It protects the facilities, maintains trained crews, produces suitable delivery aircraft, and preserves enough fuel and industrial capacity to conduct repeated missions. Under those conditions, Britain might face sustained nuclear coercion. Allied invasion planning might be delayed for much longer. Ports and true concentrations could become too dangerous to use in conventional ways. Soviet offensives might be disrupted by strikes against major logistical or political centers. A negotiated outcome in Europe would become more plausible. But this is also the scenario furthest from real history. To reach it, Nazi Germany must change its scientific policy, industrial priorities, construction program, weapon strategy, and allocation of resources years before the historical program reached its 1942 decision point. It must protect facilities from bombing without knowing in advance how the Allies will respond. It must sustain production despite shortages. It must solve the delivery problem. It must prevent intelligence leaks. It must avoid technical failure. And it must do all of this while fighting the same expanding war. At that point, the divergence is no longer one German scientific success. It is a different wartime state. Even then, nuclear weapons would not guarantee a stable Nazi victory. Repeated attacks could fracture the Allied coalition or force negotiations. They could also harden Allied war aims, trigger unrestricted retaliation when American bombs became available, and leave Germany governing occupied territories while facing resistance, economic strain, and enemies with greater long-term industrial capacity. A weapon can destroy a city. It cannot by itself occupy a continent, secure fuel, move an army, replace lost pilots, suppress resistance, or create a durable peace. So, would Nazi Germany have won the Second World War if it had built the atomic bomb before America? With one bomb in late 1944 or 1945, probably not. The strike could have produced a catastrophe, delayed an operation, and changed the manner of Germany's defeat. It would not likely have reversed the full military and industrial balance. With several bombs in 1943, the answer becomes less certain. Germany could have disrupted Allied planning, threatened Britain, slowed operations, and transformed the political atmosphere of the war. Negotiations would become more plausible. So would escalation, intensified bombing, and an accelerated American nuclear response. With sustained nuclear production from 1942 or 1943, the war might have followed a fundamentally different path. But creating that capability would require Nazi Germany to overcome many of the ideological, institutional, industrial, and strategic failures that defined its real nuclear program. That is the deepest contradiction in the scenario. The more powerful the German nuclear arsenal becomes, the more the timeline must replace the Germany that actually existed with a state capable of planning earlier, coordinating better, protecting science, mobilizing industry, and accepting enormous long-term costs. The bomb was never simply a secret formula waiting for the right physicist. It was uranium and electricity, reactors and factories, chemists, engineers, construction crews, military planners, trained airmen, secure railways, and years of work. It was an industrial system converted into a weapon. Had Nazi Germany created that system first, the Second World War could have become longer, darker, and far less predictable. But even an atomic bomb would not have abolished the oldest constraint in war. A weapon matters only when a state can build it, deliver it, survive the response, and keep fighting after the explosion.